Get started. That's a nice feedback right now. I'll move away a little bit from there. I'm Sean Kugler. I work in Disability Resources, and we're having this as our wrap up for Disability Heritage Month as part of CDAD. This is our fourth year of having an official Disability Heritage Month, where we do a lot about disability awareness throughout the month. And it's been around 10 years overall that we've been doing disability awareness during the month of October here at NAU. We're also sponsored by NAU for All, our student organization. If you're interested in either of those, we do have some people that are here that you can talk to. Students are welcome at both. Uh, we are here for Erin Callinan today. She's going to talk to us about her experiences. I got to meet Erin a couple of years ago. I've been very fortunate to keep in touch with her all this time. And I think you're going to learn a lot from her today and get to hear some very emotional times. Thank you. If you have anything to say, just raise your hand and I'll come to you with the mic.
Thank you so much, Sean. How is everyone? Good? Are you ready for some emotional things in the afternoon? Like, man, is it lunchtime? This was mid-lunch right now. Are you all starving? Did you eat before you came? Okay, so feel free to snack while you're here. If I see you starting to get hangry, then I'll pick up the pace. So my name is Erin, and I'm really excited to be here in Flagstaff with the beautiful changing weather. This is my hometown, and so I have lots of great memories in this town, and I like to just sort of escape out of the heat in Phoenix, which is where I live now. This little gal would have never guessed, if you didn't know this was me, because she's cute and stuck with me for my adult life. This little girl would have never guessed that life would have thrown her some serious lemons. This little girl grew up over in the country club on the east side of Flagstaff and grew up with incredible family, a lot of support, a lot of love, and experiencing any type of mental health issue was completely foreign to our family. We knew nothing about it. And so while I stand here today, after, it's been 17 years since I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I certainly did not always feel as proud and grounded and stable as I do today. So coming from a family where we did not know about mental health, we knew that mental health was something that everybody sort of had, but those who were living with mental illness, right, those were other people, that live on those side of the tracks, and they have those types of lifestyles, and they maybe are homeless or use drugs or alcohol, or, right, there's this stereotype that we sort of had that oftentimes is really fed through media in the way that the news portrays mental illness. So once I was diagnosed, my perception of who I was and what I was capable of being had completely changed. So I didn't always feel quite as proud and strong in my own shoes. So I want to share with you a few different things that I wrote when I was 17 after being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I am now a disorder. I'm not Erin Callinan, for she no longer exists. I am that girl who's bipolar. I'm a weak member of the mentally ill, being moved along in life like a herd of infected cattle. God is punishing me. He's glaring down from heaven with a lightning rod in hand, and he hates me, and I know it. I have to live with this title forever, like it's some kind of dog tag hanging around my neck. Crazy girls like me are looked upon as a lost cause and only useful for dinner time gossip. Now, Flagstaff's a pretty small town, yeah. Does Flagstaff tend to get a little gossipy in that small town? Have you ever noticed that, any of you? So I certainly noticed that. And I quickly found that my experiences of sort of unrest, we didn't quite know what it was. But we knew that talking about something that was out of the norm, talking about something that had such stigma surrounding it, and, being open to say, hey, I'm struggling, I don't know what's going on in my life. Unfortunately, there was this sort of tag of weakness or vulnerability that was not perceived to be a real positive thing. And so I was horrified to share my experiences. Now, I didn't have a lot of mental health issues growing up. There weren't kind of repetitive or cyclic episodes that I had. It sort of hit me out of nowhere. It was the summer before my senior year of high school, and I went to Lake Powell. How many of you have been to Lake Powell? Yeah, right? So that's kind of like our safe haven for us in northern Arizona. And I went to Lake Powell with a group of friends. And these are friends that I had grown up with for my whole entire life. And once I got there, slowly things started to sort of change. Now, I'd always had anxiety when I was younger, but nothing to the extent that it like kept me from doing things. Now, I started to feel the sense of anxiety when I was at Lake Powell. I began talking, and I talk a lot anyways, but I began talking like a lot, and fast and quickly and ongoing, and I stopped sleeping, and I had this kind of disconnect from my body, which sounded pretty wild, and I had never experienced anything like that before. And so what I learned later was this was the sort of making of a manic episode, which ultimately led to psychosis. So going from things are all good in my world, I'm about to start my senior year of high school, to calling my parents and saying, I'm at the lake, something is so wrong. I don't feel right. I feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin. And nights and nights and nights had gone by without me sleeping. And I ended up coming home from the trip early. In a panic at this point, my parents, they take me to the emergency room. And I describe what I'm feeling and seeing and hearing, and things look different. And I felt grandiose in a lot of ways. And the ER doc was like, she's just busy. She's a busy girl. She's really involved. We went to the eye doctor. They thought maybe there was something wrong with my eyes. I had migraines growing up. Wasn't that. I went to a primary care physician, explained to them how I was feeling. I was 17. I still go to the primary care physician that delivered me. So they didn't think that anything was wrong. And so for me, this was the moment of something mentally is going on. But when you talk about mental illness, or you talk about these sort of crazy, quote unquote, feelings, that people don't believe you, or you're not valid, right? I'm just a silly teenager and I'm just overreacting and I'm making these things up. And that was really the message that I got when my parents took me to my first child psychologist. Now, when I went to the child psychologist, the first thing I asked her was, can someone just go crazy? Now, what do you think? Can someone just go crazy? I dare you. I dare you. Answer out loud. Do it. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I just went off the deep end. This is a real thing. But because I didn't fit sort of the classifications of mental illness didn't run in my family, I didn't have ongoing symptoms throughout middle school or high school, the psychologist said, well, basically you need to quit doing what you're doing. I know that you're, on the cheer team, and I know that you play piano and you play volleyball and you are in student council, and you need to stop doing all of that. Take baths. I want you to read some self-help books, and I'm going to give you a blue rubber band, and I want you to put it around your wrist. Every time you forget to breathe, I want you to snap the blue rubber band and breathe. I'm like, are you kidding me? We paid you $150 for a blue rubber band. What the hell is this supposed to do for me, right? So I'm in there sitting on that big comfy couch, and I'm thinking, this lady is nutso. I'm not going back to her at all. So my perception of the mental health field was not super great in the beginning. Ultimately, few days had passed, and I continued to get worse, and ultimately went into this horrific manic episode where I was in psychosis at this point. I was hospitalized down in Phoenix, and at this point I didn't know my name. I couldn't talk. I couldn't put sentences together. My brother, who's 2 years older than me, came to stay with me at my aunt and uncle's house in Phoenix. Um, my parents my parents made they made a trip out of town right before this happened, and we thought I'd be okay. And it got worse while they were gone. So, poor things, they rushed back to Phoenix. So when my brother came to stay with me, I was always afraid that I was like dying. I was afraid that, if I didn't breathe quick enough, then I would stop breathing. And I didn't recognize people's voices or faces. And he came to stay with me, slept in the bed with me. I wet the bed every, I don't know, 3 hours. Now I'm 17 years old. Okay. He's 19. So this wasn't a tradition that us as adults had done, this whole sister wets the bed and then continues to talk about things that have no meaning whatsoever. So at this point, I'm in a full-blown episode, and after recognizing that I wasn't safe, I wasn't able to take care of myself. My family couldn't take care of me, so they hospitalized me in Phoenix. And now, mind you, this was in 2001, so this was quite a while ago. It was by far probably the most traumatic experience I'd ever had. It fueled all of my preconceived notions of what psych hospitals are like. I went in, they didn't talk about me as a person, they didn't use my name. They talked about me as a chart number. And it was as if there was this perception that I couldn't hear them just because I wasn't in a communicative state. So they would talk about me while I'm there. So I really felt like, man, I'm like an animal in this place. They do different tests. They don't talk me through it. They don't explain to me what an EEG is going to be like. And when you get an EEG, has anybody had one where they put all the probes on your face and there's all the wires? Well, when you're doing that to somebody who's in the midst of a psychotic episode and they're scared and they don't know where they are and there's 6 people surrounding them, right? So they hold me down, they put a shot in my butt so I won't struggle. And then I don't remember things for days. And the pieces that I do remember, though, were so haunting for me. And part of that was really just trying to understand, how did I go from the happy camper girl who grew up in Flagstaff and has an incredible, wonderful life to now I'm being held down in a psychiatric hospital while people shout at me. How did I get here? Well, fortunately, during that time, I stayed in the hospital for about 7 days. And if you read my book, you'll read more about what that experience was like. And one of the doctors did come in and talk to me one night. And at nighttime was always really scary in the hospital because, the doors closed, but you have this porthole, right? So they can see in and out. And they just come in and they poke their head and they look through the porthole, and so you can see the shadow in the room. And then they leave, and then they come back, and it's just that the sheets are uncomfortable, the walls need a new paint job. There's all kinds of things that don't make it an incredibly healing environment at that point. But one of the doctors came in the middle of the night, and he sat with me. He came to my bed, and he held my hand, and he talked to me knowing I could listen. And he comforted me. And he was like, you're going to get through this, and this is going to be okay. And while I couldn't say anything back, I knew that he was there. And that was a moment for me that was really significant of okay, I can do this. I can get through this. So with the help of my incredible family who, gosh, it was heart-wrenching for them to see me go through this experience, I ended up being released from the psychiatric hospital. And they gave us a huge bag of meds and were like, good luck. So we were like, oh, all right. So my parents are like, okay, we got this. Okay, we're resilient. We're going to learn everything we can about bipolar disorder. But where do we start? This was the first book that they ordered. So my dad became best friends with the post office man, because every day, UPS pull up, they'd be like, hey, Mike. My dad'd be like, thanks for the books. We ordered so many books. And I'm so blessed that my parents were so active and involved early on of trying to understand, well, what does this mean? Because the only real knowledge or education that I took away from the hospital was, if you're bipolar, you have to take a shitload of meds, and here's a whole bag of them. and you have to be under the care of a psychiatrist. So my mom's like, okay. They're like, well, we're in Phoenix and you live up in Flagstaff, so good luck finding one. So my mom's like, okay, well, let me get out the phone book. Remember the phone book? Yeah. So my mom gets out the phone book, and by the grace of God, flipping through the pages, one of the numbers that she called was the office of Dr. Caspian. Does anybody know Dr. Elizabeth Caspian in here? Okay. She's just really one of my favorite humans. And my mom called up the office, and actually her husband, Barry, answered. They do a lot of work together in the practice. And the reason that my mom decided on them is because the questions that Barry was asking about me were not clinical. It was like, who is Erin? Tell me about your family. What are her current needs? What are you hoping for her to get from coming to see Dr. Caspian? It was the first time that it was like this human to human experience. So I got out of the psychiatric hospital, started my senior year of high school 4 days later. I'm in and out of Dr. Caspian's office multiple types a week. And I mean, I was like a hot mess there at the beginning. And one of the things that I really struggled with was depression. So I realize now that when I have an episode, the higher I go, the lower I go after that. And so for me, I'm in high school, right? And my family's lived here for 35 years, so everybody knew us. And I was the new fun, juicy gossip, which was humiliating. You don't want people talking about you being in a psych ward when you're 17 years old. So my senior year, I did everything I could to just fake it, right? What can I do to ensure that other people don't think I'm crazy? What can I do to ensure that, I prove myself, right? I'm not one of those people. I got to prove myself. And in doing that, I really isolated a lot in a lot of ways. So when you think of depression, what do you think of? What are words that come to mind for you? Whether through your own experiences or those you know, people you work with, friends, neighbors. Isolating. What? Heavy. Oh, that's such a good one. No motivation. Sad. Shame. Oh, and that not in charge feeling was so overwhelming. When I feel depression, I still feel that shame of like, I'm supposed to be out of this. I'm supposed to be fixed. I'm supposed to be healed. So shame is a great one as well. For me, this is what depression looked like. Depression looked like me with a smile on my face at school. I was the captain of the varsity cheer squad. I tried to stay active with friends as much as I could, at least on the outside. So I would go to school and I'd, go to my student council class, and I didn't want to spend time with friends at lunch because that's the time that everybody talks, right? And I knew that they were going to talk about me even if I was there. So I would fake my way through it. Upon lunch, I don't want to go to lunch with people, and I don't want to risk not being invited to lunch either. That's too dangerous. So I go home to my house. I go home. I cry. I cut myself. I self-harm. I'm shamed. I have to get all of this out in this 45 minutes. This anger and pain that I have because I didn't choose to be bipolar disorder or to be bipolar, and I'm really not happy that I have this disorder now. So I go home, I self-harm, I cry, I'm upset, and then I dig my heels in, wipe up my face, go back to school, and put on the smile. So I encourage us that while we know that depression, we tend to isolate, it feels sad, it's heavy, it's shameful, it's overwhelming. We maybe don't sleep, we maybe sleep all the time, we maybe stop opening up to friends or family. Maybe we stop taking care of ourselves. We also have to see behind the smile, because sometimes depression is deep underneath that. So for my senior year, I saw Dr. Caspian all the time. And one of the things that I really struggled with was, how do I tell people what happened to me? Right? Because it's all out there. It's all out there. Everybody's Erin went off the deep end. Something happened to Erin, and now she's crazy. And oh my gosh! And did you see her? Her eyes look weird. She's taking all these meds. She's like, looks like she's jugged up, which was true. So I worked with my doctor, and I did role plays over and over and over to sort of start my script of how am I going to tell people what's wrong with me. Right? It wasn't how am I going to share with people what happened? How am I going to talk about that experience? No, it was like, how am I going to disclose and like tell them what's wrong with me? How am I going to tell people that I'm broken? We practiced that. I found some happiness throughout my senior year. There was, support from my mom and dad, and they've been married for, 42 plus years now. And them and my brother were incredibly helpful. I had some friends at the time that were incredibly helpful. But I also didn't want to be bipolar anymore. And I was also about to turn 18. So I was like, I'm over you. I'm breaking up with my meds and I'm breaking up with my doctor. So I told Dr. Cassman, I was like, meh, I don't really buy in. I don't really think I'm bipolar. I think I'm doing okay. I'm feeling better. Like people aren't like harping on my back anymore. And I got into U of A. And I'm going off to college, and I'm doing big things, all right? So I'm not going to have this crutch of taking meds like all those other weak people. I showed you. And Dr. Caspian laughs today. She's like, remember when you broke up with me? I'm like, yeah, I did. So my senior year, I got some support, but I experienced a lot of depression. I was still self-harming, still a lot of shame, a lot of stigma, but it was like self-induced stigma, right? Other people, I saw stigma from the outside, but I also was telling myself that I'm not good enough, that I don't know that I'm strong enough to get over this, that there is something wrong with me. I'm always going to be a little damaged. And this secret of mine, I can't afford to let get out, So since I don't really think that I'm bipolar and, I'm stronger than that. So I say, you know what? Well, I'm just done with you. So I go off my meds. And Dr. Caspian, was like, okay, I don't support that, but if you're going to go off your meds, let's do so in a smart way. So we kind of, I taper off my meds. And she says, if you are in fact bipolar, you will have another episode at some point. I'm like, great, bring it on. So not only at this point am I off my medication, I'm going to college in just a few months, so I'm like running out of town. And at this point, I find out about a week before I graduate high school that one of my closest friends had died by suicide. And so something that was really challenging for me at this time is that she also was living with bipolar disorder. But do you think we talked about it? No. We joked that we were the girls that we were the only girls in the school that took crazy pills. We're like, oh, I better go take my crazy pills. And we'd go to Sonic, because Sonic has the best ice ever. So good. So we'd go to Sonic, and we'd get our slushies, and then we'd pour some vodka in it, and then we'd go home, and then we'd be like, did you take your crazy pills? And we'd be like, yeah, we took our crazy pills, and we'd go out and we'd party together, and sometimes we'd be drinking, and then one of us would start to cry because of something that was going on. And she was struggling with an eating disorder at this time. I didn't know how to talk about that. So we just sort of laughed our way through it together. Now, she was at U of A. She was a year ahead of me, and she ended up taking her own life on May 14th of 2001. Now, do I think that I could have changed that? No. The amount of things that she was dealing with and struggling with it was immense. It was immense. And I recognize that while I believe suicide is preventable, and I think we all have a role in doing something about it, blaming and shaming ourselves isn't helpful either. But what I did take away is that moving forward, I never wanted to miss opportunities to talk about my illness. And I never wanted to miss opportunities that when somebody starts talking about things that sound suicidal, to keep asking, right? So what do you do if you know someone in your life and they're talking about suicide, or they're we call them invitations, right? They're putting out these invitations, these little bits of information. What do? Should you ask about it? If so, what should you say? If there's someone you think is suicidal, what's the best thing that you can do? Ask. And what are you asking? You are the best. Congratulations, you are the first winner of Beautifully Bipolar. Okay, so that's perfect. Ask. Literally use the words, are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking of harming yourself? Because what does that tell them? It's okay to talk about it, right? If we say like, are you having a down day? We're skirting around the big issue, and we're not inviting them and giving them permission to talk to us about it. Yes.
So I work on campus for a first-year experience, and we were trained. So I work with students who are on academic probation, and one of our first trainings is you ask,
Yeah.
Are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you considering harming yourself? Don't jump around it, because they're not going to be honest with you if you're not.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's so important. And then there's this myth or this fear that if you ask about it, it's going to put it in their head. It's already in their head. You're not the one to put it there. You're not that special. So we want to ask. And I really encourage you so after losing Priscilla, and I actually call her Marie in the book because Marie is her middle name. But after that, even though I had my own experiences, I wanted to learn more about how do I help people who are suicidal. I've since lost 9 friends to suicide since her in 2001, right? I mean, January, I was back at another funeral of a friend who had died by suicide. Just last month, we were at the Out of the Darkness walk here in Flagstaff, honoring him with a team we put together. So it's like, man, this is so real. And the Flagstaff community, my goodness, it has been a tough few months for you up here. So some trainings that are available that I really highly recommend. There's a program called Living Works, and it's a national organization, and they have programs. I'm sure that your local NAMI puts them together. I can put you in contact with the people if you need it. One is a 4-hour training called Safe Talk, and it trains you of how to ask the questions of if people are feeling suicidal, and then how to connect them to resources. So you're not the one who's going to be doing the crisis intervention type stuff, but you're going to identify if they're safe and get them to resources. And then they have another version called Assist, and it's the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. And I took both of those. And that second one is an all day, and it teaches you to sort of be in the middle. And so I think it's important that when we look at mental health and wellness, that we all have our own experiences, but it's important to continue to listen and learn from others, right? Because everybody's experience is different. Did you have something to add?
Mike. Okay. So I have talked to literally thousands of people about suicide. Every time somebody walked into my office, I assumed they had had suicidal thoughts at some point. What I get from that, and what it got from me, was that if we talk about norm, what we're talking about is something that's actually a mathematical term that doesn't always mean that's the thing we really want to get to. And so when I was willing to talk about the fact that, yes, I wake up in the morning some days and I feel this way and I don't know why. And I don't want to feel this way. Do you feel this way? Yes. Then we have a discussion about how I can't stop you from doing that. I want you to know I'll be here to help you in any way you want. But short of chaining you to my basement wall, you may do this. But just know that I accept that too about you. Because the shame I was talking about is toxic shame, not the kind of shame that says, oh, I violated somebody else's value as a person. It's the toxic shame that says, I'm a bad person because I got what we call this disorder, which is another whole thing I won't go off on, but it is important to know that when you change the language, then you change the whole situation. And when that person can see the difference of what you're describing is how people helped you by being there with you, right?
Absolutely.
That made you feel, quote unquote, normal and not weird.
Absolutely.
Because we're all weird.
Yeah, welcome to the club, right?
Obviously, right?
Yeah. And you bring up a great point, and I think, when we look at language and how we have the conversation, that's where the power is, right? If you notice, I didn't say that my friend Priscilla committed suicide. It's not a crime to take your own life. It's not a crime to lose a battle with a mental illness, right? So we have to move away from associating suicidality with criminality because the two don't equate each other. When I talk about mental illness, I talk about myself in living with a mental illness. I don't say, hi, I'm Erin, I'm suffering from bipolar disorder. I now talk about what has happened to me and the experiences I've had rather than what's wrong with me, right? It's this sort of trauma-informed approach and recognizing that what happens to us in our lives impacts us, but doesn't have to define us. And so I think opening that conversation in a really kind and non-judgmental way can remove some of the shame or stigma when we talk about these kinds of issues. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, free as a bird, off her meds, Erin is now 18, runs to U of A. Now, do you have any indication of where this is going to go? Doesn't go well. I go to U of A. I have an awesome time. Amazing time. There's so many people and there's free beer everywhere. People are so much friendlier in college than they were in my little gossipy town. So I get there, I'm off meds, I'm having the best time of my life. The girls in my dorm are amazing. I don't even need to sleep. It's like something, I have this like superpower that I don't really have to sleep. And I couldn't really tell you the last time I ate. And I know I'm here to go to class, but I haven't actually been to any of those classes. Fortunately, my older brother also was at U of A. And upon having some conversations with him and his friends about me having literally communicating with Priscilla, who had passed away, that talking to the deceased is not a talent that I've previously had. So that was a real red flag. At one point, I almost got arrested. This second episode was like way more fun than the first one. This one was it was like having this superpower and this grandiosity that was so fun. It was also really dangerous, really, really dangerous. Fortunately, my brother stepped up to the plate again, and I ended up in an emergency room in Tucson, and then my parents came down in a mad dash, and I was brought back to Flagstaff, and I was hospitalized here at the Flagstaff Hospital. And fortunately, this was a much, much better experience. I wasn't happy at the time, though. When I found out that my parents were coming to Tucson to withdraw me from school, I was pissed. I'm in the emergency room, so clearly I'm not in good shape. But because I'm having this psychotic episode, I don't recognize that. And that's what makes mania so dangerous for so many of us, is that we don't recognize what's at risk many times. And so I could walk down the middle of the street in traffic with no clothes on and be like, I'm living my best life, right? Not recognizing the danger within that. So my parents met my brother and his friends at the hospital, took me out, and we were going to go get my stuff from the dorm room. I mean, they had to pull me out kicking and screaming like a child, shoved me in the car. They ended up to kind of regain their thoughts. We went to a hotel right on campus to kind of recollect, oh my gosh, what are they going to do with me? So they were on the phone with doctors and hospitals, and I was wetting the bed over and over again. We laughed because my poor mom would call down to the front desk, be like, yeah, I have a sick child. If you could please bring some more bedding. Like, I'm 18 years old. They don't know that, but so I'm in pretty bad shape. We come back to Flagstaff. I'm in the hospital, and this go round was better because I was put back on medication, but not to the extent where I was the first time. I mean, the first time I didn't even know who I was. This second time was much better, and I was in the adult ward this time. Last time I was with the kids, And there was a lot of people in the hospital who sort of mentored me in the week that I was there. You know, there were people who had been in and out of the hospital multiple times. They had multiple suicide attempts. They had been in and out of rehab. I mean, the amount of experiences and challenges and struggles that they had just kind of blew me away. And so something began to shift for me at that point. I get out of the hospital. I'm withdrawn from U of A, so I feel like, you know, here I ran off to college because I was going to do it, and now I'm a dropout, and everybody in Flagstaff is going to talk about me. Well, guess what? I'm here in Flagstaff talking about it, so look who really won. But now I have to sort of like readjust of like, who does this mean I am now? You know? For any of you who have ever struggled, if you have people in your life who kind of like kick you in the butt to like keep you moving along, they are so obnoxious, for starters, so obnoxious. And thank God for them. That first semester at home, I, was on new medication that made me gain 35 pounds, which, most freshman girls in college don't love that. I was battling an eating disorder. I was living with depression. I was still self-harming. And my parents were like, get out of bed. You're going to the community college and you're going to take 2 classes. Oh, you're also going to go back to Outback and you're going to get your job back as a hostess. And I'm like, they won't hire me. My mom's like, BS, get in the car. So we like go down to the Outback. And I'm so grateful that I had people in my life at that time to like push me forward so that I didn't live in this place, because I don't know that I would have ever gotten out of bed. And that depression was really challenging for me. But that's when things changed. Like that, something changed for me that first semester. Was it hard? Absolutely. But I finally recognized that, like, you know what? A lot of people live with this disorder. I feel like I could maybe do it too. But what I've been doing isn't working, right? The self-harming, the eating disorder, when you rely on medications for your own stability, but you're vomiting them up, it's sort of hard to like get yourself on track. So I continued to see Dr. Caspian. I also saw an eating disorder specialist for about 1.5 years once I went back to U of A. I learned new coping skills. I began to increase my knowledge about bipolar disorder in a way that I hadn't before. Before, it was like, what are signs of mania? That's important. What does depression look for? Also important. What are norepinephrines? What is serotonin? How does dopamine affect you? All important. But this knowledge was about recovery and progress and pride, right? Like, how do I be my best self again? Like, I'm deserving of that. I'm deserving of living a life with this illness that's also very full. So rather than reading news articles about people who were bipolar that drowned their kids and then took a subway to New York, I started reading about people who have recovered, people who are living a really healthy, loving life. I started surrounding myself with other people who were good for me in a way. So there were friends that I had, in high school who shit on me, really. I remember inviting a few girlfriends over to tell them, I'm in tears, right? I'm doing the role play that I practiced with Dr. Caspian. I'm telling them, here's what's wrong with me, and right? And I'm crying and I get it all out. And they were like, well, let us know if you need anything. And then they left. Literally. So it was heart-wrenching for me. Now, as an adult, I know that what I was going through was just beyond anything that they could have handled at that point. But that felt pretty isolating. So in college, I went back and I was like, you know what? I'm going to sweep my life, and I'm only going to allow people in my life who nurture me and care for me and encourage me and love me in the good and the bad. Not just when I'm happy, fun-loving Erin. When I'm having an anxiety attack and I can't feel my hands, Erin. All right? So I just learned so much more about what it's like to live with bipolar disorder. I also became fascinated with the brain. So Dr. Caspian was a huge teacher of mine, and it helped me understand bipolar disorder from a medical perspective, right? So for people who are like, I don't think mental illness is real, I'm like, booyah, look at a brain scan. So this, I don't know who they found that it's got the normal brain that they compared that to. But psychiatry really helped me understand myself from a medical perspective. So that when I'm struggling or having depression or experiencing a lot of anxiety, what's physically happening in my body? That helps me clue in on what I need to do about it, so that if I'm having really bad anxiety, I don't have to go on that thought wheel of it's because I'm an idiot and I'm never going to get better, and it's because I'm weak and people are going to judge me and I'm never going to keep my job, and it's not that. I know that I can step back and go, oh, this is what's causing anxiety. So here's what I can do about it. So that was really helpful in recognizing that bipolar disorder is a medical issue. It's not a character flaw. And I still take my meds. I got back on them and I haven't stopped. I have taken medication every single day since 2002. And I've also been out of the hospital every single day since 2002. So do I think that there's other ways to treat mental illness? 100%. But for me, medication is definitely a piece of the pie. So if I'm looking at mental illness from the medical perspective, if I was diabetic, I wouldn't say like, I don't think I need the insulin. I'm just going to tough it out. No, I would take insulin and I would take care of my health. And so I look at my mental health in that same way. So I still think that therapy is really important. I drive to Flagstaff to see Dr. Caspian 17 years later, every 3 months. I've been in therapy for 17 years. I've taken meds. I've done naturopathic stuff. I do meditations. I practice mindfulness. I have a whole self-care regime. I make sure that I sleep. I'm like a solid 9 hours of sleep. Look at you. Some of you were like, oh, kind of jealous, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's a real thing. But what did I do when I was in college and everybody's partying and people are pulling all-nighters? I didn't go on those, right? I didn't go on those trips to Mexico with my friends. Did I want to? Yeah. But the repercussions of that, I wasn't willing to risk. I wasn't willing to risk having to drop out. I wasn't willing to risk, all those things in my life. With my college girlfriends, when people would come over and it'd be early in the morning and they'd want to be drinking on a Saturday, they'd be like, get out of our apartment, we'll go next door. Well, why? It's 9 in the morning. Well, Erin's sleeping. That was like the quote of college. Erin's sleeping. But what do? They let people know. They didn't tell them why. Just let Erin sleep. They knew that for me, sleep is connected to health. All right. So this finding the right dose, maybe this PowerPoint isn't working because it would scare you if you saw the 12 medications all listed on here. But finding the right dose is certainly a task, right? So many of us, we have to try things over and over and with different combinations and different dosages. And I had to do that. I've tried 12 different types of medications. I now take 2. I take Lamictal and Celexa. And I've been on that combination for 7 or 8 years now. But keep trying, right? Keep trying. There's so many new medications out there. It's so worth the effort that you put in to getting better. And I encourage people that if you go to a psychiatrist who just gives you bags of pills, go to somebody else. Like I'm working with someone right now who's a dear friend of mine, and he was recently hospitalized. He's doing an intensive outpatient program in the Valley, and he's like so overwhelmed with these meds. And I'm like, I'm going to come over to your house and we're going to count through meds. We're going to get you one of those, the cases, the Monday through Sunday with the AM, PM, evening, the whole deal. Coming out of the hospital, he's on 9 different medications. 9. Like, how do you know what's working and what's not working? And right? Oh, and it was so frustrating for him, and it was frustrating for me as well, because that's just not a way to set somebody up for success when they don't even know what they're taking or what it's for, right? So for those of us who take meds, we have to be our own advocates. We have to ensure that we know what it is, what to expect from it. What do we do if we're experiencing side effects? What if we don't want to keep taking it, right? Because we don't want to cut cold turkey. That's not safe either. So some suggestions for those of you, how many of you are in college currently? Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, it was a little rough there for a few years, but I went back to college. So these are kind of my tidbits of things that I found helpful. One of which was coming up with let me make sure we got good. Okay. I came up with a safety plan, right? I didn't wait until I was like in the gutter and hadn't gotten out of bed in 5 days and don't want to live to be like, what's a good plan if I start not to feel well? Right? No, you got to create a safety plan, create a wellness plan when you're feeling well, right? You don't put together a list of all the things you love about yourself when you hate yourself. No. So when you're well, be proactive. Put together this safety plan. So mine included, okay, so I'm going back to college. What emergency room, if something happens, what emergency room would I go to? What's the number? What's the address? Make a list. Who are the trusted people in my life that I could call for help? What are their phone numbers? Do my friends have my psychiatrist's number? Do my friends have my parents' and my brother's numbers? What are things that I can look for that would indicate to me that maybe I'm starting to experience depression? And write those things down. What am I going to do if I start to feel that way? What are some of the signs of mania? What are those red flags? And how do I respond if I start to feel those ways? Are there meds that I do not want to take? Like lithium. I never wanted to take lithium. So that was on my thing of like, if it can be avoided, I don't want to take lithium. If there was any med that I had a side effect from, put that on the safety plan as well. Right? So that if something happened, I had this whole thing all set up and structured. I even put like to friends and family of who was helping me, what could be useful. So for them to be like, calm down, it's going to be okay. I'd be like, that wasn't helpful for me, right? So I wrote down things that were helpful for them to say of like, it's okay that you feel this way. We know that you're scared. We're not going to leave you. We're going to be here right with you. Like, it will get better, right? I needed the validating statements. I needed them to validate that like it was super scary and I was really afraid. So I did the safety plan. I also used a mood tracker. The Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance has really helpful tools and resources. So I used one of those mood trackers where every day I ranked my mood, how much I slept, the medications I was taking, and then I also tracked all of my binge and purge behaviors with my eating specialist. And that was a way that when I had these trackers and diaries and I actually looked at it on paper, was like, wow. I also would get regular lab work because again, I'm nerdy, I'm geeky. I need like the medical side of things too. And I would get lab work and be like, wow, so some of these behaviors are actually impacting my body, right? Suddenly I have 5 cavities. Suddenly my fingernails are peeling. I'm getting sores in my mouth. All right. So those were ways for me to kind of go, oh, okay, here's what I need to look out for, and here's how I can respond. I also registered with the Disability Resource Center at U of A. It wasn't all that helpful. Is anybody involved in DRC here or utilized? Is that helpful here? Yay. Okay.
Disability resources has helped me in ways like I'm dyslexic, so instead of having a written journal to turn in, I type all my notes and then submit that.
Oh, fantastic.
And then if I do end up, I'm also bipolar, so if I do end up having some sort of like manic episode, I'm able to basically just send my teacher an email like, I'm not feeling well, and it's just a complete understanding without me having to elaborate.
Great, because that's how it should be. And again, this was a few years ago for me, right? This is like 2003, 2004, 5-ish. I always encourage people to get involved in the Disability Resource Center so you know what your options are. My struggle was just that because I didn't look, right? I didn't look like someone who was really struggling. I sort of always had to like prove myself, you know? So I'd go to the DRC and my accommodations weren't a lot. Like I had additional time on tests and I had additional excused absences for like when I was doing med changes and stuff like that. But it's like I would give the forms to my teachers and they'd be like, well, what is the problem? And like legally, I don't have to write the problem on there, right? On that form. And so that was some time for me where I had to learn how to advocate and like stand on my own on my own 2 feet. Yeah.
To kind of speak to that a little bit, Erin, I've worked in special education for the last 15 years, and I can feel a major difference in how just the general public responds to any kind of concern now from when I started 15 years
Amazing.
ago. And so teachers now kind of know that they can't necessarily ask those inappropriate questions, just because they've received more professional development, and also there's just more
Great.
societal knowledge, right? That
Sure.
there's things going on than there was just 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And I was also at the place there where I wasn't completely comfortable talking about it anyways. It's not like I'd get a mic in my hand and be like, well, let me tell you about my disorder. That wasn't something that was going to take place. But lo and behold, I did graduate. I went through like a weird little phase. You know how everybody, when you're in college and you're just like, I'm great, and do some weird stuff. So yeah, I like straightened my hair, I chopped it off, I dyed it dark brown. And so my parents are on the phone. They're like, honey, like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm good. I'm just changing things up a little bit. But those are moments where I have to learn. I get better at it. But when I do something that's like a little off or a little different, right? Then the people in your life are like, is everything okay? What's going on? And it pisses me off. I will just be totally honest. But that's me having to learn to get over, right? To get over that and accept that help and accept that the people in my life still have their eyes on me, right? They still care and they're watching out for me. So I did graduate from college, and I also recognize that people don't want to talk about mental health. So on the left, it says, please help Joey get a new kidney, and it's overflowing with money. Please help Jamie need psychiatric care. We're desperate. And gal has like 30 cents in there. So for me, I'm like, well, when I was in college, I opened up to friends. I told them the real story. And once I graduated, I thought, you know what? I want to do something impactful. I was going to be a teacher. So my undergraduate degree is in elementary education. And that came to a halt when I was having a tough time during my student teaching. I had ended a 5-year relationship in the same week that another friend died by suicide. So in some of my classes, I was supposed to turn something in, and I didn't, and I screwed up. It was my bad, right? But I'm a student, and I'm human, and people do that sometimes. So one of my teachers ultimately was like, I just don't even think you should continue in the program because people with mental illnesses typically don't graduate college. And I remembered on the first day of school, they gave us like this little Ziploc bag with all these little like tidbits in it for being teachers, right? And one was like a little rock, like you are the rock in a child's life. And then another one was a sticker of like, what you do like sticks to other people, like be powerful, be positive. And another one was an eraser. We all make mistakes. Well, come later that year, the eraser didn't apply to me. And so unfortunately, that put a really bad taste in my mouth about education. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of the system. But I do want to help people. I want to help people. So I moved back to Flagstaff, and I ended up working at Northland Family Help Center, the domestic violence shelter up here. And it was the best job I could have had. Started as an advocate. I became the manager there, and I worked there for about 3.5 years. And so many of the women and children who came through also had mental illnesses. So I started doing these support groups. They had no idea about me, but I'd be like, let's talk about stigma reduction and advocacy. They'd be like, okay. And so I'd use these workbooks, and they didn't know that they were workbooks that I had used and filled in 10 years ago. But I recognized that, wow, we've got to talk about this. And so the strength that I saw from people who had experienced violence and the intersections of things that they had been through was so powerful to me. And I really decided, like, I think we should bring our voice to the community in a lot of different ways. And so in 2007, I moved down to Phoenix, and I took a job working for the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. And I continued to do work in the domestic and sexual violence field and began facilitating trainings on the overlap of people who have been victimized who also are living with mental health issues. and how people who are perpetrators can take advantage of those, and what can we do to support people. So I thought, okay, well, I'm doing this really powerful work. I feel great about it, but you know what? It's really hard to talk about rape. It's really hard to work with children who have been trafficked. It's really hard to talk about some of these tough issues. So I need to add something else into my self-care regime. So I became a mentor almost 6 years ago, and this is Faraha. She turns 13 next Sunday. And we started when she was 7. So I've been able to see her really grow and change. And I have found from my own mental health that helping other people and doing things that I find value and purpose in really keeps me on the straight and narrow, really keeps me stable. And when I have those down days, then I think back on the people in my life that are courageous and keep trying and have overcome. And that helps me give me strength to do the same. So about 5 years ago, I thought, all right, well, I got this story, and you know what? I think I'm just going to tell it. People talk about it. I'll just write a damn book, and at least they can make sure they get the story straight. So when I was 29, I ended up publishing this book, Beautifully Bipolar, An Inspiring Look at Mental Illness. And I really wanted to change the conversation. I wanted to change the conversation from how can you live with a mental illness? How can you support those with mental health problems? How can we encourage each other? Rather than, here's all the terrible things about living with a mental illness and all the terrible things those people do to other people in their life. I wanted to be able to talk about mental illness openly and without the shame. And I'm so glad that I did, because I have met incredible people along the journey. I mean, fabulous people that have just changed my life completely. So I started with the Family Involvement Center. Now I'm in Phoenix. I work in domestic and sexual violence. I don't know anybody in the mental health field. I still drive to Flagstaff to see my doctor. Fortunately, it ended up on the desk of Tony Donnelly at the Family Involvement Center, and she put together my first big sort of speaking event. So my family came with me. My brother flew in from California, and we spoke on a stage in front of about 175 people, and we shared our story. Never thought in a million years we would have done that. And I began to get just so inspired by all the stories that people would tell me along the way. And I've been there too. And what about this? And I've overcome this. And this is what I still struggle with. And here's who my family is. It was this powerful movement. So I ended up joining My Kid, which is an agency. It stands for Mentally Ill Kids in Distress. And they focus on serving youth and children with recent diagnoses. And through volunteer work, I have found that it's really helped my mental health. So my family, this is my dad, Mike, my mom, Prill, and my brother, Adam. We laugh that we're going to get a van and we're going to go take it on the road because we've had the opportunity to speak publicly and share our story at conferences in several different states and throughout Arizona. And we really think that mental illness affects the whole family. And so we have struggled together and we've recovered together. And as we openly talk about it, we find that it gives permission to others to openly talk about it as well. So my mom she's the crier, right? She brings in the tears and the sort of the heart and such power of how do you manage this when you're a parent. And then my dad comes in with his fun quirks and jokes, and then it makes my mom cry a little less, and then they get it together. They're just the perfect dynamic, and it's really neat for me to have this type of support. I also recognize that it's very rare. Not everybody has that type of support. Recovery looks very different for us. So if it's not your family or your parents or your children or whomever, build your own support system with the people that you value, who value you, who are willing to be by your side through the good and the bad. Because on those low days, it's really hard to reach out. So surround yourself with people who will reach out to you. So as we wrap up, this is a good reminder that I tell myself when it comes to recovery, that yes, I'm doing good. Life is good. I'm happy. But it's not realistic to think that it's not going to get ugly or messy along the way, because that does happen. But the way that I found the recovery was by doing these things, finding my place in the world, find out what helps me feel better and what doesn't help me feel better. How can I contribute in my community? How can I stay connected to other people? That's what makes me feel centered and grounded. So while I had no faith in the education system, and I know that I'm saying this on NAU campus, so it's bad. I was at a speaking event about 3 years ago, and a gentleman came up to me. He was like, what is that? Do you have your doctorate? What's your doctorate in? And I was like, no. I was like, no, I have a degree in elementary education. And he was like, well, you're not a teacher. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I'm not going to go into this whole thing, right? I was like, yeah, I just don't think school is for me anymore. And he was like, well, why wouldn't you go get your master's? And I was like, I don't know. I just don't know if I could handle it. I don't know if I could do it. He was like, why don't we meet for coffee? Okay. So we met for coffee the following week. And yeah, he was a doctor and professor at ASU. And he himself had lived with depression. And he sort of shared some of his story with me and was like, there's no reason that you cannot pursue your formal education. So I applied for graduate school the following week and got in. And yeah, I'll wrap up with my master's in social work in May. And yeah, which is exciting, right? And so every time, my grades get posted and I'm 2.5 years in and I have a 4.0 and I post it on Facebook and I'm like, yeah, Dr. Lopez from U of A. Doing my graduate internship, I did it at Mental Health America of Arizona in Phoenix. And so if anybody isn't aware of the agency, it's a pretty great spot. I'm a little bit biased because they have since hired me as their executive director, or their assistant director, I apologize. And the message that I love about this organization, it's a national organization, is they have this motto of before stage 4. So if somebody's worried, they find a lump in their breast or they worry about some kind of health issue, do we wait till it's stage 4 to go to the doctor? No. We want to get it before stage 4. It's stage 1 when the symptoms are there, or the it's not right feeling. And so a big part of their message is about destigmatizing mental illness and making it okay to reach out for help early on in the process. And if you go to their website, it's just mhaarizona.org. They actually have a screening. It's an online confidential screening tool, and you can select from 10 different screens, and it provides you with information about which one of those stages, 1 through 4, that you may be in, and connects you to resources. So as I've sort of come to this place in my life, I always just feel incredibly grateful and appreciative to be allowed to be in the same spaces as many of you who, are volunteering your time, or your teacher gave you the nudge of, hey, go to this thing. But for opening yourself up to talking about mental health and mental wellness, and those experiences of yours that you bring to me continue to inspire me. And so while the world can certainly be a tough place, we've got a lot of things going on, and it seems tragedy just comes one after another sometimes. We've really got to be here and take care of ourselves and each other. And so this quote is something that I have sort of guided myself by for the last 17 years. It says, be soft. Do not let the world make you hard. Do not let pain make you hate. And do not let the bitterness steal your sweetness. So no matter where we're at in our life, whatever space that may be, no matter how painful or heavy, there's certainly hope. And those of us here in this room know that. So I think we have, how long do we have? Till 1? Is that right? Okay. So we have about 23-ish minutes for questions, thoughts, comments, shares. Yes. Hi, Gary.
And this has been about my life, what you've been talking about. And Kurt Vonnegut, he had his dark time. Kurt Vonnegut, when he wrote, was not fantastic. A good person to be around. He knew it. And if you look at all the creative people that exist that chose to keep their illness, if you will. The person who directed 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I'm forgetting his name, he talked about, he said, I choose to be manic. I will do nothing because when I'm manic, I am so creative, I'm not willing to give that up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the whole word about manic depressive, that's what it used to be. There's a way that we try and correct words, because that thing about sticks and stones make ache my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's bullshit. Words are the
Yeah,
cup.
words hurt.
Yeah, words are the cup that we pass ourselves around with much of the time. You know what I'm saying? So I want to just pass on to you one of the things that was an astounding realization to me. If you never read another thing to get info about mental illness, there's a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic: Magic Bullets, Psychiatric Drugs, and the Astounding Rise of Mental Illness in America. Now, when I was first in practice in 1980, the DSM, the Bible of psychiatric disorders, had 150 disorders. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? We could name and treat 150 different psychiatric disorders. There's now somewhere around 600. So we're either getting really, really crazy, really smart in identifying, or there's some other things driving this that we need to know about. Now, I want to say that if you need some help and sympathy, I learned this from about cutting. I had a client, and when I said, I don't personally know this, she went online, she got so much support, and what she got was, oh, here's all these other people that do this, there is a payoff, I can learn what I can learn about why I might do it, what supports that, and is there another way? And the last thing I want to say is almost everything you talked about here is, how do I get a choice about who do I get to be? Everything. How do I get that space where I can say this or that? Or, I don't know, maybe you can tell me. Thank you for writing your book and being willing to do this. Please read this book. And he's written another one with a Harvard study, somebody at Harvard, that continues to look at the relationship between the chemistry that is going on in the brain, no kidding, but is it causing that, or is it only reflecting what is going on? See, there's a big difference to that. And so I want to just say that this idea, my buddy who teaches psych over at CTC, he the other day did a survey of his, just how many here are willing to say are on psychotropic meds? Half of his class, bipolarness, manic, and depression. That's what you have. Naming it, who is it making comfortable to change the name? And if you want to have a laugh, anybody that doesn't know George Carlin, look him up. He does a whole thing on words. Shell shock is now post-traumatic stress disorder. Because who does that make feel comfortable? It sounds more clinical, it sounds more research. But really, shell shock talks about what it was happening to that person. It was a shock beyond what they ordinarily would have. So I just want to say the whole thing about disorder and mental health, we all could just say we're mentally healthy, but in a unique way when we try and fit the norm. What we're saying is, well, that's what most people look at. Where the creative people are, that's where the breakthroughs, what's new is really new. So go for the tail and forget the norm. Yeah. And I'm with you with the education thing, because right now I can tap into my phone and get answers to the things that are current. Textbooks are 10 years out of date when they're even in date. And thank you for letting me go on, but this is really close to my heart because I've been doing this, and what I found is the reason I could do it is because I'm as crazy, if not crazier, than my clients. Seriously. She's laughing, but she knows she had to live with me, and it's just my daughter. And she's partly responsible for this, so thanks again.
Thank you for sharing. And I think, your point is far, okay. Yeah, we can, I always encourage people to sort of self-identify their experiences in a way that feels good to them. So if it's using that very clinical language, go for it. If it's creating something completely new, go for it. For my family and I, we use the least PC terms early on. I mean, I have a whole chapter in my book called the loony bin. Like they were not PC, they were not, but for us, it was my experience, everything was like so scary and like that when we talked about like going off the deep end and being a crazy person, and that sort of brought us a sense of comfort and comedic relief. So I think, yeah, finding what works for you is incredibly important. Other thoughts, comments? Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So, uh, as someone who does have bipolar disorder that's also in the Black community, it's really difficult to get that stigma taken away. Um, and a lot of folks within the Black community are unwilling to get help and are unwilling to sort of go out and talk about these things. And so I've been trying really hard, and I'm very blessed to have a mom who her master's degree is in special education. So I I grew up in an environment where she was very open with me, but she also one she noticed little things. So like I was very depressed at a young age. I had anxiety at a very young age. And so that's what we sort of focused on. Um, and then, the changing of medication and everything else like that. And my mom was like, you can be as open about it as you want to be. And so when I ended up coming here, that's when I started having my manic episodes. I started getting manic episodes at a similar point at 17. But it happened here. I didn't get to have it at home, unfortunately. I didn't get to really go through it with my mom, and I still felt like I had a stigma, even though my mom has always been very open, has always been like, what did you learn in therapy today? And she's always been very open about it. But because of that stigma within my community, it sort of made it difficult for me to want to get that help. And I ended up not getting help until I got forced to go get help. And so I think that even you coming here is kind of opening it up a little bit, is making me you've made me feel like I'm more comfortable, not only here, but also just because normally I work in the Office of Inclusion here on campus, and normally I wouldn't tell anybody. Like they'd be like, "Oh, where's Taylor?" And my boss knows because I talked to her about it. But people don't know that I have bipolar disorder, and people don't know that I have depression and anxiety because I kind of shield that up because a lot of the folks that frequent my office are people of color. So it's like because of that stigma, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. But this kind of I was asked by my boss to do sort of like a seminar on like mental health and like talking about that, and I kept on saying no. I've been saying no for 2 years, and you've made me sort of want to actually do it. So thank you.
Awesome.
And think, every time that we open the conversation, even just making the space, right? Even just making the space for people to talk about these types of issues. Oh my goodness, it's like, wow, my brother, blah, 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 my mother, my sister, my aunt, just yesterday, it's like we are all so closely threaded in this together, but it's just scary to open up, right? But by you going, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this space available. Oh, gives me goosebumps. The amount of people that can come and go, man, thankfully that space was made and I got to go be a part of it. And it'll help another person go, you know what, I think I'm going to talk to my doctor. I think I'm actually going to talk to my boss because I need to get some accommodations at work. But because of this thing, I now have a strength that I didn't have before. So awesome. Awesome. Anyone else? Yes.
I was actually doing a project for one of my classes, and it kind of discusses how, like, financially, it's just super hard to get, like, the help you need, especially, like, growing up, and, like, insurance doesn't always cover everything. Like, growing up for me, we didn't always have insurance, so it kind of, like, limited a lot of, like, childhood, because our parents were just always afraid we'd hurt ourselves, and we wouldn't be able to, like, get it covered, or just, like, therapy and everything. I was wondering, like, what were the, like, repercussions of, like, having to always be in and out of hospitals and always having to be in and out of, like, seeing, like, a psychiatrist, like, I was just wondering, like, how was that on your family
You
financially?
brought up a really good point. I mean, fortunately, when I was hospitalized, we did have insurance. But, it's like 6 days in the hospital is like $42,000. I mean, it's absurd. So my parents, were financially able to cover what insurance couldn't cover. It wasn't easy. I don't think it's easy, especially for anyone, because it's just unexpected. It's, oh, all of a sudden you have these expenses. And with medication, I have health insurance, and I had health insurance through my parents, but my Dr. Caspian doesn't take health insurance. And so while I was living at home and throughout college, they paid out of pocket $170 or whatever, so that I could see her, because there were times where I went to the guidance center and I went to Southwest Behavioral because we thought, well, I'm like, I'm also very pig-headed, and I'm like, I don't want my parents to pay for this. I can do this, and I'm an adult, and blah, blah, blah. And the care that I got was just not helpful at all. So my parents paid out of pocket. And then once I graduated high school, or once I graduated college, I was kicked off their insurance. I couldn't be on insurance anymore. And me on paper is like a hot mess. So no insurance companies would literally pick me up. Like 6 of them declined me. So I ended up, the year after college, I put almost $13,000 on a credit card to cover medication. And then finally I was on Access. I started working at Northland Family Help Center, but I couldn't get benefits for about 3 or 4 months. So I was on Access, and during that time, I, could go to the guidance center. The doctor that I first met with sat at a desk facing a wall while I sat behind her, and she typed everything that she said, or that I said. She'd ask a question, and I'm behind her, and she'd type it out, and she'd be like, oh, do you need med refills? Yeah, I take Lamictal. Well, what's that for? Like, you're the doctor. It was such a crazy mind-altering experience. So I've just gone back to Dr. Caspian, and I still continue to pay $160 out of pocket each time. And if that means I just have to change my life, and I include it like I would pay my water bill, it took a long time to pay off $13,000 when you're 20 years old. But financially, it's challenging. And what I have found is that having private insurance has been a bigger hindrance of services than having, if I had public care. Some of the support groups and access to peer groups, I don't qualify for because I have private insurance. So it's something that within the mental health field, we're definitely trying to work on getting some parity so that people with private insurance can still access some of those good programs that are out there.
Yeah, because at some point you mentioned how you spent $150 for the blue rubber band. Do you think that because people took it less seriously in the medical field, you were just wasting all this money for the help you couldn't even get at the time? Because I feel like you guys had to search a lot before you really found that person. So I feel like you guys kind of put yourself in debt just trying to find the help that people didn't take seriously.
When you compare to how long some people try, we didn't try that long. I mean, some people are trying for years. And as you mentioned, I was at home with my parents. Thank God I wasn't at college for my first episode, because I had them taking me to doctors and doing this kind of stuff. But it wasn't as bad. I mean, the mental health field and services are much better now, but there weren't wait lists back then like there are today. Oh my gosh. I mean, I work with people and they're like, okay, well, I need to get in, and it's 4 months before they can see a psychiatrist. So for us, it was whatever we need to do, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right now. And I, fortunately, my parents were in a financial place where they could support me in that way. But it would have been an incredible barrier for other people who maybe didn't have that parental support that I had access to. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little about the therapeutic relationship between you and Dr. Caspian, or maybe you've done other talk therapy, and what role that's played and what's been helpful.
Yeah, good question. So Dr. Caspian is, pretty much my hero. And what's worked about our relationship is that I have been in the driver's seat of my therapy from day one, which is really powerful. So she utilizes a biopsychosocial model. And so I've appreciated that, because when I see her, she's not just treating bipolar disorder, right? She's recognizing how my disorder impacts, me physically, but also socially, and, sort of the person and environment experience. She is very much a believer that, yes, medication can supplement a really good health plan. So I take really low dosages of medications, and I always have. You know, there's times in my life where I've had to increase meds, and we do that. But she really treats her patients as though the medication sort of just this piece of it. She has actually come down to Phoenix on more than one occasion. And last time I spoke at FMC at the McGee Auditorium, she came and we spoke on a panel. And so she's like pretty much a part of our family. And I think any person who is a psychiatrist or a psychologist or in that helping field, focusing on client-driven services and promoting advocacy and empowerment. One of her philosophies was, she's like, Erin, I love you, but the less I see you, the better. And she wasn't like, hey, you know, you need me and I want you in my office and I want to take your money and I want to. She's like, no, I want to help you, you know, get the wheels back on your own car. I'm just going to be in the driver's seat, right, helping you along, but I want you to drive on out of here, you know, and I'll be here to support you. And so my treatment with her was always, it was never about this like stagnant, this is where we are and we're going to be working together. It was very much goal driven. You know, we did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. That was really helpful, especially I think just naturally I'm somebody who can get really caught in negative thoughts, and I'm a worrier and I'm anxious sometimes. And so learning how to kind of rewrite the story that I tell myself about my experiences moving forward has been incredibly helpful. So yeah, I feel like I learned about empowerment from her, and therapy was also available for my family as well. So my parents were in therapy. We did group, like as a family therapy, we did individual therapy. My parents also took the family to family NAMI class here in Flagstaff, which was really helpful. I got connected with peers as early as I could to kind of say, hey, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's experienced this. But yeah, I think every human being should be in therapy. I don't care what your life story is. Go to therapy. So yeah, and because it's been such an incredible fit, and I've felt so, yeah, just really empowered, and like, you know, she's respected my autonomy from day one, and I've been able to kind of set the pace of our working relationship. And so I've gone back, and 17 years later, I'm almost positive I have like the longest like filing drawer. You just pull the whole cabinet out and it's like Callinan, 40 files. But yeah, until she goes out of practice, nope, I'll come show up at her front doorstep. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It has this long history, but I'm hearing that maybe from the very first day, she kind of started with the assumption that you are going to be able to take care of yourself.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. I mean, I went to see her and she was like, oh, you're going to get better. Like, let's get that started. I mean, the first thing she did was take me off the meds that the hospital put me on so that she could get to know me first, which was like unheard of. Right? So she wanted to know about me. And so we would, even today, we go in and I go in and I write down on this sheet, she'll ask me to like rate my mood or how has this been? How has this been? You know, 1 through 5. And then at the bottom, is there anything specifically you want to talk about? So like I get to decide what we talk about, which is great. And we spend literally the entire time talking about just life. And then at the end, it's like this much stuff about medication, you know? And so she set the precedent from day one that this illness is treatable. It doesn't define you. The pain you're in right now is only temporary, and I'm going to help you along the way. Yep.
And then one more thing, could you talk about the mindfulness bit of your coping skills?
Yeah. So Dr. Caspian got me into mindfulness. And then, you know, when you're in Flagstaff, you're just kind of hippity dippity anyway. So I began learning about mindfulness. The first book I read actually was called Commit to Sit, because I found that meditation was really hard because I have a very like quick, busy mind. So I started, her and I would do like guided meditations, and I find the body scans to be really helpful. So for anybody who hasn't done it, you just sort of, you know, sit, find your grounding, and then they have a lot of recordings online that you can use, or you go through like Headspace, and actually going through and like observing and channeling into my physical self is helpful. When I was at Northland Family Help Center, we also had a clinician there at the shelter, and he practiced mindfulness with all of us. So for that, for my, to me, that means I'll do like guided meditations. If you don't have a diffuser at home that plays sounds as well as the diffuser thing, get one. It's so helpful. I also do a lot of gratitude journaling. A lot of times I drive to Flagstaff from Phoenix and just like go out in the middle of the woods with a computer and write, and I find that to be helpful. I have to really practice in being sort of grounded and doing breathing exercises and things like that because, like I said, I'm just sort of naturally a worrier. And then in Phoenix, there's a Buddhist temple, and I practice Christianity. But there's a Buddhist temple nearby me that has every Monday and Wednesday, they have open meditation nights. And so I'll go in there and meditate, and I just try and be intentional on, like, I call it noticing, right? Like, how many times are you in the car and you drove by like 40 billboards and you couldn't tell one thing that you saw? I'm horrible at that. So part of my mindfulness practice is just like noticing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So I feel like we're wrapping up. I do have some books here. If anybody wants to buy them, they're $15. I can run a card or I can take cash, but I don't have any change to give you, so I'm really sorry. I do also have some business cards. So the website is up here. This is actually an old website. I started a consulting business in March. And so I have business cards here with like the updated email address. I still use all these accounts, so you could use either one, but definitely take a business card with you. I would love to stay in touch. And if you all in your community or your profession or within your family, if you are ever doing any cool stuff in mental health, let me know, because I've got a big sort of audience, and I can always promote your events and, advocate for you all and anything I can to do, to support the good work that you're all doing here.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yes.
We do have one other question for you.
Oh, yes.
You're naming off a ton of resources. Are any of those in your book?
So like the formal resources, maybe not. Why don't I? Did you all like register? Oh, cool. So my suggestion would be also go to I'm like, what is my website now? POMM Consulting, Peace of My Mind is what it stands for, pomconsulting.com. I have lists of resources on there as well that might be helpful. Thank you for putting that up there. That's great. And on the website, I also have some links of like tools for recovery where I talk about, or I have links to like the mood trackers and the food diary and things like that. So cool. Well, thank you for sharing your lunch hour with me. I appreciate your time.
I do highly recommend her book. It is fantastic.